It all started like a cliché, a chance encounter that blossomed into something more. I met him, let's call him Alex, at a friend's art gallery opening. He was charming, with an infectious laugh and eyes that seemed to see right through me. We talked, laughed, and by the end of the evening, I felt a connection I hadn't felt in years. You see, with my husband, things had become routine, almost stale. There was love, but it was the kind of love that felt more like companionship than passion. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I found excuses to see each other. Coffee turned into dinners, and dinners turned into late nights talking under the stars. He made me feel alive, like I was rediscovering parts of myself that I thought were long gone. The way he looked at me, the way he touched me, it was all so intense, so real. I hadn't felt this way in so long, and it was exhilarating. But with every stolen moment, every secret kiss, a part of me felt torn. I would go home to my husband, the man I had promised to love and cherish, and I'd feel like a stranger in my own life. Sitting across from him at dinner, I'd force a smile, laugh at his jokes, all the while feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of my own deceit. It wasn't just the physical affair with Alex, it was the emotional betrayal that weighed heavily on me. I loved my husband, or at least I thought I did, but with Alex, it was different. It was like a burning flame that I couldn't extinguish. 2 years passed in a blur of secret meetings and whispered promises. And then one day, I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live this double life, juggling my love for Alex with the facade of a happy marriage. So, I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I decided to leave my husband. I wanted to be honest, to stop the lies, and to start anew with Alex, the man who had reignited the passion in my life. It was heart-wrenching to see the look of hurt and betrayal in my husband's eyes when I told him. He didn't deserve this. He was a good man, but we had drifted apart, and I couldn't force myself to love him the way I once did. The ensuing days were filled with painful conversations, tears, and the dismantling of the life we had built together. Before we dive into the next chapter of this rollercoaster story, I've got a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this tale of love, adventure, and unexpected twists, how about showing some love? Hit that like button to let me know you're on board. It's a simple click for you, but it means the world to me. It's like a virtual high five, telling me to keep the stories coming. And hey, why stop there? Go ahead and hit subscribe too. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming up next. So here's how it went down. After years of sneaking around, of whispered I love yous and dreams of a future together, everything came crashing down. See, my affair with Alex, it wasn't just a fling. I mean, sure, it started that way, but it grew into something more, at least for me. I was ready to turn my whole life upside down for him. I left my husband, you know? I took that leap, thinking Alex would be right there to catch me. But guess what? When push came to shove, Alex hesitated. It was like watching a mask fall off. He revealed that he wasn't in this for the long haul. I was more like, I don't know, a toy to him? Something fun to play with but not to keep. It hit me like a ton of bricks. All this time, I thought we were building something real, but to him, it was just a game, a diversion from his everyday life. And the worst part? He couldn't even give me a straight answer. It was all, I don't know, and, I'm not ready for this. I was left hanging, feeling foolish and used. There I was, having turned my whole life upside down, and for what? A man who saw me as nothing more than a temporary escape from reality. It's funny, in a sad sort of way. I gave up everything, my marriage, my stability, my reputation, and for what? A fantasy. I was so caught up in the passion, the excitement, the escape, that I didn't see the truth. I ignored the little voice in my head that whispered doubts, that pointed out the red flags. I was living in a dream world, and boy, did reality come crashing down hard. Now, I'm not playing the victim here. I made my choices, and I have to live with them. But it's hard, you know? Rebuilding your life from scratch, knowing you threw away something real for something that was never going to last. It's a tough pill to swallow. And Alex? He just moved on, like nothing happened. I see him around sometimes, and it's like I'm just another face in the crowd to him. It hurts, sure, but it's also a wake-up call. I need to find myself again, figure out who I am on my own, without a man to define me. So that's where I am now. Starting over, trying to make sense of the mess I made. It's not easy, and some days are harder than others. But I'm getting there, one step at a time. I guess that's all any of us can do, right? Just keep moving forward. learning from our mistakes, and hoping for a better tomorrow. Alright, let me tell you about the time I tried to salvage the sinking ship that was my marriage. After the whole debacle with Alex, I was a wreck, but I had this sudden urge to fix things with my husband, Mark. Maybe it was guilt, maybe fear of being alone, or maybe a bit of both. So, I scrapped all my plans of a new life with Alex and turned my focus back to Mark. You see, Mark and I had history, years of shared memories, and I couldn't just let that go without a fight. I started doing all the things I thought would rekindle our romance. Cooking his favorite meals, planning little surprises, trying to talk more. I even suggested couples therapy, something I never thought I'd do. But, let me tell you, trying to win back someone's heart when you've broken it is no easy feat. Every smile, every touch felt forced at first. Mark was hurt, and rightly so. He'd retreat into this shell, and I'd be there, knocking, trying to get in, to make things right. It was like dancing to a song where you can't quite catch the rhythm. I remember this one evening, I planned a romantic dinner, candles, and all. I thought it'd be like those movie scenes where everything just clicks back into place. Spoiler alert. It wasn't. We sat there, mostly in silence, the air heavy with all the things we weren't saying. I wanted to shout, "I'm sorry, I still love you, let's fix this." But the words just wouldn't come out. It was heartbreaking. Through all this, I learned something important. Love isn't just about grand gestures or passionate affairs. It's about the quiet moments, the understanding, the forgiveness. I realized I had to be patient, give Mark space to heal, even if it meant he might not come back to me. The turning point came slowly. We started talking more, not just about us, but about everything: work, friends, the news. It was like rediscovering an old friend. I started seeing glimpses of the man I fell in love with, and it gave me hope. But here's the kicker. Through all this, I started rediscovering myself too. I realized I'd lost so much of who I was in trying to be what I thought Alex wanted, and then in trying to win Mark back. I started doing things for myself, finding joy in little things, and somehow, that made all the difference. So, where are we now? Well, it's a work in progress. Mark and I, we're taking it one day at a time. There's still hurt, and trust needs to be rebuilt, but we're getting there. It's not the fairy tale ending I once dreamed of, but it's real, and honestly, that's all I want right now. I guess life's funny that way. You make plans, and life laughs and throws them out the window. But sometimes, in the midst of all the chaos, you find something worth holding onto, something true. And that's what I'm doing, holding onto this second chance and seeing where it takes us. Okay, so here's the scoop. The moment of truth in my messy, tangled tale. It turns out, my husband, let's call him Mark, wasn't as clueless as I thought. He had this nagging suspicion, you know? And in a move straight out of a detective novel, he hired a private investigator. Yep, you heard that right. A real, live pie to tail me and unravel my double life. I mean, looking back, I can't blame him. There were signs, loads of them. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the way I'd jump if he walked into the room unexpectedly. I thought I was being slick, covering my tracks, but love, or maybe it's betrayal, has a way of bringing out the detective in everyone. The day he confronted me, it was like a scene from one of those dramatic TV shows. He sat me down, and there it was, the evidence laid out in front of me. Photographs, texts, you name it. My heart sank to my feet. I wanted to deny it, to scream, to cry, to do something. But I just sat there, frozen. And Mark, oh man, the look on his face. It was a mix of hurt, anger, and something else. Disappointment, maybe? He asked me, why? And for the life of me, I couldn't find an answer that would make sense, even to myself. It's not like I didn't love him. I did, and I still do in a way. But there was something missing, something I thought I found in Alex, my not-so-secret-anymore lover. The fallout was epic. Mark moved out the next day. Our house, once filled with laughter and love, felt like a ghost town. I wandered through the rooms, each corner a reminder of what I had lost. I tried calling him, but he wouldn't answer. Can't say I blame him. And then there was the talk with our friends and family. The embarrassment, the shame. I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter every time I stepped outside. People I had known for years looked at me differently. I was no longer just Sarah. I was Sarah, the woman who cheated on her husband. But you know what the craziest part was? Alex, the cause of all this drama, bailed on me. Turns out, Our love wasn't strong enough to handle the harsh light of reality. So there I was, alone, trying to piece together my life, one shattered part at a time. In the midst of all this, I did some soul searching. It's funny how rock bottom can be the solid foundation you need to rebuild yourself. I started therapy, took up hobbies I'd long forgotten, reconnected with old friends. It wasn't easy, facing myself in the mirror every day, but it was necessary. I won't lie and say it's been a fairy tale since then. It's been hard, really hard. But I'm learning, growing, and somehow, I think I'll come out of this stronger. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, but it's what you do with them that counts, right? So, here I am, telling you my story, mistakes and all. It's not pretty, it's not perfect, but it's mine. And I'm owning it, every last bit. Let me paint you a picture of what it's like to hit rock bottom in a marriage. It all started when my world came crashing down the moment my husband, Mark, found out about my affair. I mean, there I was, face to face with the stark reality of my actions. The trust, the love we had built over the years, it just crumbled away in an instant. It's hard to describe the look on Mark's face when he confronted me, a mix of disbelief, hurt, and a kind of sadness that just cuts deep. I tried to explain, to apologize, but how do you apologize for something like that? Words just felt so inadequate, so pointless. The following days were a blur. Mark moved into the guest room, and our house felt like a cold, loveless place. We were like two strangers, awkwardly navigating around each other. The silence was deafening. Every time our eyes met, there was this unspoken conversation, a mix of accusation and regret. I'd lie awake at night, replaying everything in my head. How did it come to this? Why did I do it? The affair with Alex, it seemed so thrilling at the time, an escape from the mundane. But now, faced with the consequences, it felt so foolish, so selfish. Mark and I, we tried to talk it out, but what can you really say? The trust was broken. He looked at me, not with anger, but with this deep, profound disappointment. That hurt more than anything. The man who used to look at me with so much love and warmth now just had this hollow look in his eyes. And then there was the loneliness. My friends, who used to be our friends, started to distance themselves. I guess it's hard to stand by someone who's betrayed their spouse. I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter, marked and judged by everyone. But, you know, hitting rock bottom has a way of making you take a hard look at yourself. I started to realize the magnitude of my actions, the pain I caused. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the deceit, the breaking of a sacred bond. So, I started therapy. Not to fix my marriage, I think deep down I knew it was beyond repair, but to fix myself. To understand why I did what I did, to learn how to forgive myself, and to hopefully, one day, earn the forgiveness of those I hurt. Now, looking back, I see how much I've grown from that painful time. Mark and I, we're no longer together, but we've reached a kind of understanding, a mutual respect born out of the ashes of our marriage. It's not the happy ending I once dreamt of, but it's a start. A start to a new chapter, a more honest and self-aware one. Life's funny that way. It throws you curveballs, and sometimes you strike out. But it's about getting back up, dusting yourself off, and stepping up to the plate again. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so here's the chapter where everything just falls apart. Picture this. I'm standing there, feeling like the ground's just vanished under my feet. I had lost it all. My husband, Mark, the man I'd been with for years. Alex, the guy the first thought was my exciting escape. My home, where I'd made a million memories. And my reputation, something I never thought I'd care about until it was tarnished. After the truth came out, it was like watching dominoes fall. Mark couldn't look at me the same way anymore. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces. And Alex? He just disappeared into the ether, like our affair had meant nothing. So there I was, alone, feeling abandoned and utterly lost. But it wasn't just about the people. I had to move out of the home Mark and I shared. Walking through those empty rooms, packing up my life in boxes, it felt like I was packing away years of my life, memories turning to dust right in front of me. Each photo, each trinket, a reminder of what I'd lost. And let's talk about my social circle. Word travels fast, you know? Friends I'd laughed with, shared secrets with, they started to drift away. Invitations dried up. I'd walk into the local coffee shop and feel the weight of every stare, hear the hushed whispers. It's one thing to lose people, it's another to feel like you've lost your place in the world. I spent a lot of nights alone, thinking about how I got there. The choices I made, the lies I told, the people I hurt. It's like I was in this fog, only seeing what I wanted to see, and by the time it cleared, everything I valued was gone. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom, you've got nowhere to go but up. So, I started to rebuild, slowly. I found a small apartment, a place that didn't have the ghosts of my past. I got a job, something to keep me busy, to give me a sense of purpose. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed, days when the weight of my mistakes felt too heavy to carry. But I kept going. I started to reconnect with old friends, the ones who stuck around. I even made some new ones, people who didn't know my story, who didn't look at me with judgment in their eyes. And through it all, I learned a lot about myself. I realized I was stronger than I thought, more resilient. I learned about forgiveness, not just seeking it from others but forgiving myself. It's a work in progress, but aren't we all? So, that's the chapter of my life where everything fell apart. But it's also the chapter where I started to put the pieces back together. It's not a pretty story, but it's mine. And you know what? I'm still writing it, one day at a time. Alright, let's dive into one of the toughest chapters of my life. Imagine this. I'm sitting there, feeling totally isolated, like I'm on an island all by myself. The decisions I'd made, the choices that seemed so right at the time, they had backfired spectacularly. My family, the one thing I thought was unshakable, was now just a pile of rubble because of me. You know, it's one thing to mess up your own life, but it's a whole other level of pain when you realize you've dragged down the people you love with you. My husband, Mark, was more than just a partner. He was my best friend, my confidant. And in my pursuit of something I thought I needed, I'd lost him. It wasn't just a marriage that ended, it was a friendship that crumbled. But wait, it gets more complicated. We had kids, two beautiful, innocent souls who suddenly had to deal with the fallout of their parents' split. Seeing the confusion and hurt in their eyes, knowing I was a big part of that pain, it tore me up inside. I went from being a full-time mom to a part-time visitor, trying to maintain a relationship with them amidst the chaos. And then there was the house, the home we'd built together. I had to leave it, leave all those memories behind. Packing up my things was like turning the pages of a photo album, each room a snapshot of a different time in our lives. It was heartbreaking. The solitude was crushing at first. I'd go days without talking to anyone. My phone, once buzzing with messages from friends, went silent. People I thought were my lifelines seemed to vanish when the storm hit. It was a wake-up call about the nature of relationships, about who's really there when the going gets tough. In the midst of this, I had to face myself, the hardest part of all. I spent long nights staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The guilt, the regret, it was a constant companion. I kept asking myself, how did I get here? And the answers were never easy to digest. I started to journal, pouring my thoughts onto paper. It was a way to offload some of the weight I was carrying. I also turned to therapy, which was a game changer. It helped me unpack my feelings, understand my actions, and start the healing process. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom, you really find out what you're made of. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I rediscovered parts of myself I'd lost along the way, my love for painting, my passion for writing. I began to build a new life, a different life, but one that was authentically mine. Rebuilding bridges with my family was slow and painful. There were awkward phone calls, tense visits. But I kept at it because they meant the world to me. Slowly, we started to find a new normal, a way to move forward despite the past. So, that's the story of how I faced the wreckage of my choices. It's not a fairy tale. It's messy, it's real, but it's also a story of resilience. It's about picking up the pieces and finding a way to move forward, even when it feels like everything's against you. Here goes a chapter that's tough to tell, but necessary. It's about that moment when the storm of my choices finally hit me in full force. I was sitting there, in the middle of my now sparse and quiet apartment, realizing the irreversible magnitude of what I'd done. It's like waking up from a dream, only to find out the nightmare is real. I had lost so much, my husband, Mark, who had been my rock. My kids, who looked at me now with a mix of confusion and hurt. Friends who I thought would be there through thick and thin. But it was more than just losing people. It was seeing the pain in their eyes, knowing I was the cause of it. The thing with making choices like I did, with having an affair, as you tell yourself it's just about you and your happiness. But it's not. It's like throwing a stone in a pond, The ripples just keep spreading, affecting everyone around you. I saw that now, clear as day. I had shattered the trust and love that my family had for me. Then, there was the loneliness. I thought I knew what being alone felt like, but this was different. This was a loneliness that echoed through the empty rooms of my apartment, a constant reminder of the life I once had. I'd come home from work, and there was no one to share my day with, no laughter of my kids, no gentle teasing from